Gregory Peck won an Oscar for To Kill a Mockingbird, but he nearly sabotaged its most iconic moment. The 6-minute scene required police protection in Southern theaters, and studio executives wanted it gone. But Peck's own doubts were even more dangerous. He wanted to soften the film's message about racism, thinking it might tear the country apart. What happened next would change Hollywood forever. Gregory Peck was born on April 5, 1916, in La Jolla, California. His full name was Eldred Gregory Peck, but he didn't like it. He often joked that his mother found the name in a phone book, and he had no choice but to live with it. His father, Gregory Pearl Peck, was a pharmacist of Irish descent, and his mother, Bernice Ayres, had English and Scottish roots. There was an interesting link to Irish history through his grandmother, who was related to Thomas Ashe, a key figure in the 1916 Easter Rising. This was the same year Peck was born, which felt like a strange coincidence. Peck's early life wasn't smooth. When he was 3, his parents separated, and by the time he was 6, they divorced. This meant he had to move between his father, mother, and grandmother. It made his childhood unstable, and he learned early on to depend on himself. At 10, his parents decided to send him to St. John's Military Academy in Los Angeles, thinking it would give him stability. Instead, it made him feel isolated. He later said that by the age of 15, he knew he had to look out for himself. Money was always an issue during his younger years. Later, when he moved to New York to chase his acting dreams, he was so poor that he sometimes slept in Central Park. Even earlier, when he was in college at Berkeley, he struggled financially. Tuition was only $26 a year back then, but it was still hard for him to afford. To survive, he worked as a kitchen helper at a sorority, washing dishes in exchange for food. Acting wasn't part of Peck's original plan. When he joined the University of California, Berkeley, in 1935, he was studying to become a doctor. That changed when the school's little theater needed male actors. The director asked him to play Captain Ahab in a production of Moby Dick. Peck agreed, even though he had never acted before. He wasn't great, but he enjoyed it enough to act in 5 more plays that year. This experience gave him a love for acting, and, in a strange twist, connected to his future movie role as Captain Ahab many years later. At Berkeley, Peck was also on the rowing team, which later helped his image when Hollywood used it as a story to explain a back injury. The truth was less glamorous. The injury happened during a dance class with Martha Graham. Despite the injury, the rowing story stuck and made him seem even more impressive. In 1939, Peck left Berkeley just 1 course shy of graduating. He felt he had learned all he needed and wanted to move forward. When Peck moved to New York, he only had $160 in his pocket. To make ends meet, he worked as a barker at the 1939 World's Fair and as a tour guide at Radio City Music Hall. He even modeled for catalogs. Things changed when he earned a scholarship to the neighborhood playhouse, where he studied acting with Sanford Meisner. Around this time, he also dropped the name Eldred, marking a fresh start in his career. In 1942, Peck made his Broadway debut in The Morning Star. He was 26 years old, and the play opened during World War II. With many Hollywood stars away at war, Peck stood out as new talent. His Broadway success caught the attention of movie studios. Although he failed his first screen test in 1941, big studios like 20th Century Fox, MGM, and RKO soon wanted him. His agent, Leland Hayward, negotiated an impressive deal, getting top billing, script approval, and a high starting salary, even though Peck was still unknown. Peck's big break came with his second film, The Keys of the Kingdom, 1944. He played Father Francis Chisholm, a missionary priest, in a role that required him to show many emotions as the character aged over decades. The movie wasn't a huge blockbuster, but it performed well, and critics praised Peck's acting. He earned his first Oscar nomination at just 28 years old. Although he didn't win, the nomination made it clear that he was a serious talent. This role also brought Peck multiple film contracts with major studios. He became one of the most sought-after actors of his time. Gregory Peck's second Oscar nomination came for his role in The Yearling in 1946. He played Ezra Penny Baxter, a poor farmer trying to raise his son in the wilds of Florida. Making the movie was very difficult. It started filming in 1941, but had to stop because of problems with child actors and the early Technicolor process. In 1945, filming started again, this time with Peck as the lead. Peck worked hard to make his performance believable. He spent time with real Florida farmers to get their accents and mannerisms just right. His connection with child actor Claude Jarman Jr. was praised, and the movie's emotional depth touched audiences and critics. Peck's next nomination nomination came just a year later in 1947 for Gentleman's Agreement. This film was bold because it dealt with anti-Semitism in America, a very sensitive topic at the time. Peck played Philip Green, a journalist pretending to be Jewish to expose discrimination. Many studios avoided this kind of story, but Peck took the risk, even though it might upset some viewers. His performance showed the many ways prejudice appeared in post-war America, both obvious and hidden. The film won the Oscar for Best Picture, and even though Peck didn't win Best Actor, his role in such an important movie made him even more respected in Hollywood. During this time, Peck wasn't just acting in challenging roles. He was also dealing with personal struggles, like a failing first marriage and the stress of sudden fame. Despite these challenges, he gave performances that showed his professionalism and commitment to his craft. This period in his career proved his talent and courage as an actor. In 1945, Peck worked with Alfred Hitchcock on the psychological thriller Spellbound. This movie was important for both Peck and Hitchcock. Peck, only 29, and in his fifth film, played Dr. Anthony Edwards, a man with amnesia who might also be a murderer. The role was complicated, requiring Peck to show both vulnerability and danger. Hitchcock's directing style pushed Peck to give a layered performance. The movie also included a dream sequence designed by Salvador Dali. Although the sequence was cut down to about 2 minutes, it added a surreal and memorable element to the film. Peck later recalled Dali's eccentric behavior on set, like wanting to use live ants in a scene, which had to be replaced with chocolate sprinkles. Making Spellbound wasn't easy. Producer David O. Selznick often clashed with Hitchcock, even bringing in his own therapist as an advisor, which Hitchcock didn't like. Despite these issues, the movie was a huge success, earning over $6.4 million and 6 Academy Award nominations. It introduced audiences to psychoanalysis, a new concept for many at the time, and even started with a disclaimer explaining it. Behind the scenes, Peck and his co-star Ingrid Bergman had a secret affair, which wasn't revealed until decades later. Their real-life connection added to their on-screen chemistry, which was one of the movie's highlights. Peck's role in Duel in the Sun in 1946 was very different from his usual characters. He played Lute McCanley's, a villainous and wild man, far from his typical noble roles. The movie, nicknamed Lust in the Dust for its sexual and violent themes, was one of the most controversial films of its time. It told the story of a love triangle involving Lute, his brother, and a half-Native American woman. The production was chaotic, with multiple directors and a massive $6 million budget. Filming took almost a year and faced backlash from censors and religious groups, with some states even banning it. Despite this, the controversy drew audiences, and the movie made over $20 million. Critics were divided, but the role showed Peck's range as an actor willing to take risks. In 1947, Peck co-founded the La Jolla Playhouse in California with Mel Ferrer and Dorothy McGuire. He wanted to stay connected to live theater while working in Hollywood. The Playhouse gave Hollywood actors a chance to return to their theatrical roots during the summer. The first season opened with Peck starring in Night Must Fall. Many famous actors performed there, and the Playhouse became known for high-quality productions. Peck played an active role as artistic director until 1959, but financial struggles and his busy film career caused the theater to go on hiatus. Gregory Peck's role in 12 O'Clock High in 1949 was a big moment in his career. He played General Frank Savage, a man leading a group of bomber pilots during World War II. This role got him his 4th Oscar nomination for Best Actor in just 5 years, showing how quickly he had become one of Hollywood's top stars. The movie was very different from his earlier films. It wasn't just about war, but also about how it affected people's minds. Peck's character had to stay strong under extreme pressure, but the stress started breaking him down. People watching the film found men who fought against injustice. His deep voice and tall, commanding presence made him perfect for these roles, but he wanted to try new things. In the 1950s, Peck said he was tired of playing the strong, silent type. He wanted to do comedy, musicals, or anything different. Peck started taking risks. In Roman Holiday, 1954, he starred in a romantic comedy with Audrey Hepburn. The movie was a success, but not everyone thought comedy was his strength. Later, he took on darker roles, like Captain Ahab in Moby Dick, 1956. Not all his risks worked, though. In Beloved Infidel, 1959, he played F. Scott Fitzgerald, and critics didn't like it. Peck admitted later that he might have been trying too hard to prove he could do something different. During the filming of The Big Country, 1958, his frustration boiled over, and and he argued with the director, even walking off the set. This showed how badly he wanted to break free from being typecast, even if it caused tension. When Peck was offered the role of Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird, he wasn't sure if he should take it. He had just come out of a tough period in his career and worried about being typecast again as a noble hero. The story dealt with racial injustice, which was a sensitive topic in the 1960s. Peck wondered if the film would cause problems, especially in the South. He also worried about whether the movie could live up to the book, which was loved by so many people. In his personal diary, Peck wrote, "Can we really do justice to this book? It's not just a story, it's a piece of American conscience." Peck was also nervous about playing Atticus Finch. He thought the character was almost too perfect and worried about making him seem real. He didn't want Atticus to feel like just a symbol or an idea. He wanted him to feel human. But as Peck thought about it more, he realized that Atticus's values were very close to his own. Peck believed strongly in civil rights and had been active in groups like the NAACP and ACLU. Playing Atticus Finch felt like a way to stand up for what he believed in. Harper Lee, the author of the book, told Peck that she had based Atticus on her own father, who was a lawyer and a quiet hero. This touched Peck deeply and made him feel like the role was a chance to honor people who fought for justice. And he finally took the role. Gregory Peck, in March 1961, he completely dived into it. He read Harper Lee's book 17 times, writing notes all over it. Then he went to Alabama to see how people talked and acted. Peck even borrowed one of the old man's suits to wear in the movie. He won pages of it by practicing every day for 3 months. He worked for hours with a coach to get the Southern accent just right. He even gained weight because he thought Atticus should look a little heavier. Peck decided to grow his sideburns too, and he didn't touch them the whole time they filmed. And even though it wasn't in the book, he learned how to play the harmonica because he thought Atticus would do something like that to relax. That idea made it into the movie, and it's one of the sweetest moments. Working on the movie wasn't easy though. Peck, the director Robert Mulligan, and the producer Alan J. Pakula didn't always agree. They spent months talking about every little thing, having long arguments about how the story should go. One fight lasted 6 hours when Peck wanted to change the movie's title because he didn't think To Kill a Mockingbird fit the story, but they found ways to compromise, and everyone clapped for more than 5 minutes. That moment became legendary. Years later, it was even ranked 13th on the list of the greatest movie quotes of all time. Even though his performance looked effortless, the role was very hard for Peck. The speech was about deep racial injustice, and Peck struggled with how to make it feel real. He was a white man playing a character dealing with the weight of racism, and that wasn't easy for him. In April 1963, Peck won the Academy Award for Best Actor for his role as Atticus Finch. It was his 5th Oscar nomination, but his first win. During his acceptance speech, Peck showed injustice, which was especially powerful during the civil rights movement in the 1960s. It premiered only a few months after a major event where violence broke out over racial issues at the University of Mississippi. The timing made its story feel even more important. The American Film Institute, AFI, later named Atticus Finch the greatest movie hero of the 20th century. The movie also made it onto AFI's list of the greatest American films of all time. These honors show how much of a lasting impact the film and Peck's performance have had over the years. However, over time, some people began to criticize the movie and Peck's role. During the 1960s, thanks to films like The Guns of Navarone and Cape Fear. In 1961, The Guns of Navarone was released and became the biggest hit of the year, earning $28.9 million at the box office. In the movie, Peck played Captain Keith Mallory, a skilled mountaineer leading a dangerous mission to destroy German artillery. People loved his performance because he brought depth and intensity to the role. The film's success was so big that it inspired a sequel, Force 10 from Navarone, which came out 17 years later in 1978. Right after this success, Peck starred in Cape Fear in 1962. This movie shocked people because of its dark and disturbing story. Peck played a lawyer, Sam Bowden, who is terrorized by a psychopathic criminal. Max Cady, played by Robert Mitchum. The movie dealt with scary themes like psychological torture and implied violence, which were very bold for that time. At first, some critics weren't sure about the film, but over the years, it became a classic thriller. Peck's role showed a different side of him, vulnerable and complex. The movie became so iconic that Martin Scorsese remade it in 1991, and Peck even had a small role in the remake as a tribute to the original. It's amazing that Peck managed to star in The Guns of Navarone, Cape Fear, and To Kill a Mockingbird, all within a short time. In To Kill a Mockingbird, also released in 1962, Peck played Atticus Finch, a lawyer fighting for justice and equality. This role is considered one of his greatest performances. In 1972, he produced and narrated a documentary called The Trial of the Catonsville Nine. The film told the story of 9 Catholic activists who burned draft files to protest President Richard Nixon, who added him to his infamous enemies list in 1973. This list included people Nixon saw as threats to his administration. Peck actually found this funny and would joke about how his only regret was not being higher on the list. Despite the risks, Nazi doctor Joseph Mengele in The Boys from Brazil. The movie was about Mengele's plan to clone Adolf Hitler and create a new Reich. This role was a huge departure from Peck's usual heroic characters, and many people were surprised he took on such a controversial part. Peck spent months preparing, learning about Mengele's mannerisms, and even adopting a thick German accent. His dedication was so intense that he had nightmares while filming. The movie received mixed reviews, but people admired Peck's bravery for taking on such a challenging role. In 1969, Gregory Peck received one of the greatest honors in America, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. President Lyndon B. Johnson gave him the award at the White House to recognize his contributions to film and his efforts to make the world a better place. Johnson praised Peck for bringing dignity to acting and for choosing roles that highlighted important social issues, like To Kill a Mockingbird. At the ceremony, Peck gave a heartfelt speech about civil rights and peace, showing how much he cared about justice both on and off the screen. Peck's medal put him in a group of only 20 people who received the honor from Johnson, including other legends like Walt Disney and Helen Keller. Gregory Peck had 2 important marriages in his life, and both shaped him in different ways. His first marriage was to Greta Kukkonen in 1942, when he was 26 years old, and still building his career in Hollywood. They had 3 sons, Jonathan in 1944, Stephen in 1946, and Carrie Paul in 1949. But as Peck's career got bigger, it became harder to balance his work and family life. After 13 years together, their marriage ended in divorce on December 30th, 1955. This was a big turning point for Peck, as his personal and professional lives had become so demanding. Only a month later, Peck married again. On January 31st, 1956, he tied the knot with Veronique Pisani, a journalist from Paris. They had first met in 1952 while Peck was in Europe promoting his movie Roman Holiday. Their connection was strong and immediate, and soon they started a life together. They had 2 children, Anthony in 1956 and Cecilia in 1958. This marriage was very different from his first. While his first marriage struggled under the pressures of fame, his second marriage was solid and lasted 48 years, right until Peck's death in 2003. Veronique played a big role in his life, standing by him at premieres, visiting him on film sets, and being a steady presence in both his public and private world. Peck cared a lot about being a good father, even though his career kept him busy. He found ways to include his children in his life, bringing them to film sets and traveling with them whenever he could. Later, as he grew older, he especially loved spending time with his grandchildren. One of them, Ethan Peck, followed his path into acting, which made Gregory proud. Through all the ups and downs of his life, Peck's dedication to his family never faded. He balanced the challenges of being a Hollywood star with his love for his family, which was always at the center of his life.